Hello everybody and welcome to another edition of the Good Bit Podcast. Thank you very much for joining us this week, whether you're listening to this on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or one of the many other audio outlets for the Good Bit Podcast, or you may be watching the video version on CM42 TV on YouTube, and if you are doing so, hopefully it's not a sight for sore eyes. It's lovely to see you today, and this week's episode is all about the 1996 hit film Jerry Maguire, starring Tom Cruise, Cuba Gooding Jr. and Renee Zellweger, great name. And yes, we're joined once again by a great guest, my old pal, John Crooks.
Yeah?
It's a good name, by the way. Is that like your shoot name, John Crooks?
That's my name. It is the name I was given.
That's nice. I don't know what it is. It just sounds like an actor name, which is great, you know?
It is a very good actor name. It's one of these ones that's very neutral as well. And it I don't know. I think it's quite short and punchy. You know, you can just be like John Crooks, as opposed to John McAlpin Rutherford the Seventh, which doesn't quite have the same.
Right. I thought about changing my performing name, but I feel like I was known as my first and second name. Like people would talk to me as Chris Moffat, so I feel like that kind of rolls off the tongue a wee bit. I don't know if that's just because I've heard it so much. So people would just call me by my full name. So that would I just go with that. But I did think about changing it a few times. What would your stage name be if you did change it? Do you have one?
Oh God. I'm torn between, because I remember talking about stage names and stuff at one point at college, and remembering that various people had really silly names. I mean,
right.
Or kind of borderline silly, like Cedric the Entertainer, for example. That's a wee bit silly. But I don't know. I can't decide if I'd go full on silly and be like Grandmaster Tobias. I don't know, or just go slightly different and be like James Crooks. Just different enough that it's a different name, but not totally different at all. People could call me Jim.
Yeah. I think John the Entertainer would be funny.
John the Entertainer, yeah, not bad. What about you? What are your options?
My mum's maiden name was Harvey, and I think Christopher Harvey sounds really good. And I thought about that, but then I was thinking I don't know, if I meant wrestling and things like that. I thought it'd be a good wrestling name because it has different syllables, so people could chant it. But you don't really need that if you're an actor. You know what I mean? There's not as if there's people in the audience going to be chanting your name. You know what I mean? You don't even think about that. But I don't have any funny ones. I'd like a funny one, though. I think
think of it. Yeah. Maybe that's what we should do. We should just start a company that comes up with silly stage names for actors.
And then we could agent them. You know what I mean? Trademark the names and stuff and try and get commission off their names. That's a brilliant idea. You've heard it
full
here
of good ideas. What can I say?
Yeah. How have you been? I've not seen you in the longest time. We used to get the same lift to school, to college every morning sometimes. But other than that, I've not seen you in the longest time. How have you been?
No, it's been a while. I've been all right. I've been quite busy this year. I went back to college because they introduced a new year at it. So it's the honors course of the acting course that we both did. But this time the focus is much less on how to be an actor and more on creating companies and devising your own work and stuff like that. So we've been looking at business models, business plans. We've had guest speakers from various corners of the agency, not just casting directors and agents, industry, not just casting directors and agents, but people that work in marketing or people who are specifically involved with funding bodies and stuff like that. Just to kind of get a better insight into how it all kind of works, and that way we can slot in wherever we find the best place to do so.
That is quite a scary thought, though, isn't it? When the lecturers are just explain to me within 10 minutes how you're going to live, or how you're going to portray yourself. So for the first little while, you're like, oh my god, but then when you start thinking about it, you kind of think, well, I could maybe do that, and then I kind of into this sort of thing. So it's not too scary, but when you actually have to do the presentations, that's when it feels like a bit more like school, doesn't it? Because it's you've got an assessment or whatever, or an assignment to do.
Absolutely. I think that was something that I felt very much in when I was doing my BA year in 2019. And I was getting so stressed out because the entire focus was like, you need to know by June. You need to know, man, what it is you need to do, what you want to do, and where you're going to do it. And if you're going to get an agent, and if it's, and if you don't, what the hell are you going to do with yourself?
Right.
And I found it all very stressful. And I was just getting myself into a rut. And I kept saying, if only I could have an extended holiday where I wouldn't have to do anything or worry about life, and I could just sit indoors and relax. And then in March, the world went into lockdown. And I was like, this is nice. I can live with that. Yeah. But obviously,
I'm here with my thoughts.
Yeah, exactly. Someone up there is listening to me. Yeah. But, obviously, like everyone else, I got a bit fed up with it. And I knew that I probably needed to kind of get back on the horse a bit. So that's why, for me anyway, this course sounded like a good idea, because I don't know. I feel like now I'm much better prepared to go out and take the industry by storm than I did a couple of years ago,
I feel like mega busy just now, but like in a good way, you know what I mean? Like I was like, oh, finally we're going to, we're getting lots of stuff done, which is really good. But see, on that point about like learning about things that you're going to talk about in the industry and like marketing and professionalism and things like that. Do you know, I feel like when you were in high school, there's so many things that they kind of missed that you need to think about. You know what I mean? Like, for example, I'd never even thought about tax before. And then I got to like my second year of college, and then the person we both know very well, Tony Kelly, was like, we're going to do a lesson on tax. And I was like, aye, that's like something you're probably going to need to do. You know what I mean? So like, I don't know who you need to talk to about that, but I'd love to learn more about just life things as you're getting older. You know what I mean? I don't know.
I do. I know exactly what you mean. Taxes, mortgages, all sorts of like real world big life issues that frankly we should know more about than we do. Like I don't even think I really know what a mortgage is. The bank gives you money, which you then have to... That's just a loan? Is it just a loan? I don't know.
It's a loan. And I feel like you could go and... I mean, you can go and talk to someone about it and say, I want to have a mortgage, I think, and then they probably help you. But like, in terms of like, who do you go to? Where do you start? All that stuff. Very grown-up conversation we're having. Listen to that. I'm glad we're talking.
It is, yeah.
So you're also specialising in directing right now, right? You're helping out with a current production at the college, Vanity Fair.
So part of the course is that we all have to create a festival of original work. So we're all getting off into wee groups and writing our own stuff, and some of us are kind of directing our own things as well. So I'm helping out on a Friday, just kind of assistant directing, very much heavy on the assistant, light on the directing. But it's good. It's interesting to like... I've said this in the past a couple of times. Like, I'm much more of like a wordy thinker. Like, I'm not good with moving people about. I'm the kind of director that'll sit and be like, just go where you feel, guys. Just do whatever comes naturally and hope that they are all right with that, Whereas the director I'm working under at the moment, Amanda Beveridge, she's quite, I think, because she's well practiced at it, she's got a good idea of like, right, you're coming in from here, you need to do that, you need to stand there. So it is interesting to kind of see it from the other perspective, especially because it's so early on in the process that is really all they're doing. It's just, right, you're coming on here, you stand there, actually no, stand there because it looks better. Like, it's making me kind of open my eyes a bit more to that. But the thing, what I'm really looking forward to actually is the character work of it, because as someone who's very wordy, I like getting into how you say lines and the differences that makes to the intentions or whatever, where you put the stress, and like if you move that comma or if you ignore it, what happens. And because the play that we're working on, Vanity Fair, is so wordy, and because all the language is quite outdated, if you like, then it's a really rich fucking body of text, you can really kind of get into it. So it's been good.
It's interesting as well when you do have two directors that do have different styles. Like, so for example, Amanda will be very much like, you have to go here, and then you're going to be very much like, just go where you feel. And that's like a real thing. Like, I remember when I first came out of drama college, I did two like theatre and education tours, like right off the bat. My first one was with a comedian called Rob Kane, and he was the director of it, and he was very much like, we've done this for years, you're a new actor coming into the team, just be you, stand where you want to go. Here's the material. Let's make it funny, right?
Aye.
So I was like, oh wow, I just came from being directed by Gregor Duncan, who was very, very pernickety, which is great. And I was like, well, I loved working with Gregor, and I was like, right, okay, this is great having that freedom. And then I went into one with Baldy Bain like the next year, and it wasn't as if it was really strict, but it was a kind of happy medium. We were directed by Colin McCready and David Goodall, and they were like, explain to me why you're doing this and explain why you think this is a good suggestion. And it's like there's different ways each director works. And I just found that really interesting. You know what I mean? That's kind of what I miss now about being in education and being at drama college, because you work with so many different people, classmates included. You know, I don't know how you feel about, I know you're more directing wise, but you still, I'm assuming you still perform now and then, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I did a play at the start of February, actually, that was
Nice.
long story. It was supposed to be on before Christmas, but there were some difficulties with the cast, etc. But on the topic of directing, that was a really interesting one because we were all kind of roughly the same age and kind of in the same position in terms of like where we were in the industry, if you like. So Phoebe Byrne was directing that, and one of the producers, Rebecca Riddell, was helping out, and it was really good. Not just because it was the first performing that a lot of us had done for however long, but also because it was very much like a kind of collaborative thing, you know? Apart, once we got the kind of initial like 2 days maybe of, right, you go there, like, not mostly for kind of practical rather than like deep, insightful acting things.
Yeah.
But it was very much like we had a lot of back and forth with the directors about like character and what we're thinking, how we're feeling, sort of stuff. And like it was the first time in a long time as well that, or ever really, that I was actually thinking about the physicality of the character and things like that, which is something we always learn, but not something I think I've properly done. Like actually sat and been like, right, how does this guy sit? How does he hold himself? Like, how does he stand? How does he move? Like, these are all things that I was quite happy to go through in a class, but had never really brought to the table. So it was great actually to do that. Yeah. I think as well, just because it had been so long, I was like, let's go all in. Let's do everything.
Totally. And I feel like when you do train like that, when you watch movies, like you kind of, I don't know if it ruins it for you, but you start overthinking, like, why is this character doing that? And why did the director make you do that? Not all the time. Like, see, when I'm watching Star Wars, I don't go, why did George Lucas tell him to do that? But at the same time, like, you know, you go see like a new film and you go, that was a really interesting decision by this like new young director. Like, I wonder what the motivation was behind that. You know, I don't know if that's like an actor thing, or if you've been to drama college, you know, you're just like trained to think like that. I don't know.
Maybe it is, because there's a lot of things that really have been ruined for me because I've had like Vikings actually is a very good example. When I first watched Vikings, I was like, yes, this is really cool. These are Vikings. They're doing Viking things. It's kind of historical. This is great. And then I was watching it last week with my mum, and she loves like Holby City and Casualty, so frankly she doesn't have a leg to stand on, but she was like, this is all very complicated and unnecessary. And I was like, you know what, Mum, you've got a point, you know, because they need to fill in all these gaps of like Ragnar is in Norway, but now he's in England or whatever, but there's like 10 years between them. So what will we do? I know, his brother wants to start an uprising and now he's having an affair, and it's all this random stuff that is resolved either in 20 minutes or never at all and just kind of forgotten about. And then they just move on.
Yeah.
And it's, you know, I
think that's like
maybe
the team of writers are like there for hours on the table. Just how are we going to get around this? Not trying to like come up with something.
Yeah, just chuck it in. Just for a day. Aye. Why not?
Yeah. Vikings, I've not seen Vikings. I kind of fancy it though, because one of the wrestlers, Edge, he was in Vikings, wasn't he? How was that show? Is that one that is still going, or is that finished?
It finished a few years ago, I think.
All right.
But it was. It's good. It looks very good, and a lot of the main characters are very, very strong. I'd say where it lets itself down is exactly what I'm talking about. Is like silly, unnecessary, almost like red herring type plots that don't get resolved or lead nowhere.
Yeah.
But they're few and far between in like the first couple of seasons. But the deeper you go into it, it's just madness.
Sorry, I was going to say anything funny how Game of Thrones came along and just like changed so many different things. You know what I mean? Like then we had Vikings, now we've got The Witcher, and now there's like so many things that are like not set in that time, but like is that fantasy based thing. And Game of
Yeah, that
Thrones just
kind
kind
of
of started it
idea.
all,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. I think even I'd go as far to say as like Pirates of the Caribbean
right.
really kind of got us into that. Let's go into the past a wee bit in terms of like aesthetic or whatever.
And people are going
Um,
to be into it, you know?
and people are going to be into it. Yeah, like for a modern audience at least, like they're going to be into it. But I think you're right. Game of Thrones is definitely like that peak of like, right, here we go,
Yeah, just got
medieval
huge.
fantasy. Yeah,
Medieval fantasy, absolutely.
yeah.
Talk about in terms of when you started wanting to be a performer. Is this always something that you've wanted to do since you were a wee boy, or was it like a later in life thing? Did you always want to be an actor, or was it more so just like doing shows and that sort of thing?
I think I have always wanted to be a performer. Like I've got very early memories of being around at my granny's house and watching Mary Poppins and like doing the dance for Step in Time with my sister, like
Nice,
wearing my grandpa's like flat caps and stuff like that. And like even so far as doing like nativity plays in their front room and whatnot, like just for the fun of it. Um, and then obviously as I got older, like there was a lot of school plays that I was involved with and like choirs and stuff like that too. Um, and yeah, I think it is always something that I've just really had a lot of passion for. I think the writing and directing side of it came a lot later on. Like I didn't start writing things until I was well, not properly anyway until I'd say I was kind of in my late teens maybe.
right.
Um but no, it's always been something that I've interested. I just like telling stories, I guess. Like that's kind of how I always think of it at the moment. Like in one way or another, I just like spinning a wee yarn, grabbing
Totally.
people's attention for a wee while. Yeah.
You never want to admit it, do you? In terms of like you like that, not attention, but you like kind of being able to be the center focus to go. Here's what we're going to be doing, and like I've always been interested in that sort of thing. You know, mine goes back to my grand's house as well. Like I would always try and do like wee plays and stuff, and I'd write wee things. Not that they were any good or anything, but at the time,
No,
like
sure.
it's not as if I was sitting there going, "Oh, I'm going to do this just now, and then I'm going to go and do this other job." Like I just always thought I'm going to be performing in some way. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think
Aye.
that's why I started like the podcast and I started like the YouTube channel because it started from a young age anyway. You know, and I was just like, I wanted to have something. You know, so I think a lot of people are
Absolutely.
kind of in the same boat that way. You know, starting performing off really, really early, and then they become whatever they want to be. You know,
Yeah, it all kind of grows arms and legs. I mean, like again, doing silly wee plays and stuff with your family is how we all get started. I think in some ways. In fact, my sister and my big cousin were really into it before, but not very seriously. And it was, as I say, like I think the first time that I realized, oh, I can actually do this as like a career was
right?
I was maybe about 10 or 11 maybe. Um, and I'd just done the Glasgow Gang Show, which, if you're not familiar, is like a variety show that the Scouts and Guides put on every
Cool.
year. So there's gang shows all over the world, but I did one in Glasgow. And the first show was in, as it was called at the time, the RSAND. And they had posters up for like acting classes and whatnot. And I went to one of those, or I went to a string of those on a Saturday morning. And it was about that time that I started like seeing actors around the building and stuff. And I think that was where the penny dropped of like those folk you see on TV, they actually do this all the
Yeah,
time. Like it's not like they just appear for a film and then that's them. Like this is their living. This is what they
it's their
do.
job. Yeah,
And I'm like, that's cool. I want to do that.
yeah.
So yeah, I think that was maybe the first time that it really. I've never really thought about it. Thank you, Chris. I've never really thought about that before.
Come on here, you know, you have a wee bit of therapy. We
Yeah,
talk about our
yeah,
life. That's what it's all about. So then you joined N Clan a
yes, yeah.
year, 2 years before, like after me, I think.
Aye,
Um,
yes. I reckon we would have been in the same year if I had left, if I had started N Clan when I left school, or I'd maybe
right,
be like a year above you or so. Because what happened was, when I left school, because I knew that I wanted to study acting, and because I'd been at the RCS on Saturdays for however many years, they were the only place I applied for. I
of
applied
course.
literally nowhere else, and then as like backups had loads of like history courses off in the background.
Hmm.
So I get to my RCS audition. I think it goes quite well. Turns out it didn't. And during the interview, the guy's like, why do you want to come here? And I'm like, oh, well, it's in the city. I know the building. These are my people. Like, I love it here, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, well, this is the only place you've applied, which tells me that you don't know what you want to do. So what do you want to do? Exactly. Exactly. My jaw just dropped. I did not have an answer for him, and it totally freaked me out. And of course, I didn't get in. So I went off and did history and French for a year with Russian as a third subject, and believe it or not, I didn't really enjoy it. And I spent a lot of time doing amateur theatre on the side. And I think that was, again, where like I had a bit of a moment of this thing I'm supposed to be doing I'm not enjoying, and the thing that I'm blowing it off to do I'm really enjoying. So I dropped out of uni and did another round of auditions at various big places and had no luck, and it gave me a bit of a knock. And then Incline came along. In fact, I had a flashback to somebody I knew from school who was there when it was Motherwell College and said that it was a really, really good course. And so I was like, maybe this is the place for me. And yeah, sure enough, yeah. One audition with Ian Grieve and Francis Lyons, and I was sold.
I was lucky. My audition was just with Francis Lyons, which is maybe the easiest one.
Really? Just on his own?
Yeah, and I did. My audition was like a comedy speech, and it was the only thing I had. I think I only did the one piece. I can't remember, but it's so long ago now. But I remember going in, and I had it in my head. This is a funny speech, and I had moments where I thought, this is where the funny bits are in the speech. And I'm doing it for Fran, and he was like laughing at bits that I didn't think were funny, and it pure threw me off. I was like, "Oh, he's not supposed to be laughing now. Do I look funny? Am I doing something wrong?" But I don't know. I feel like it would have got put off if it was like maybe Amanda and Gregor or something sitting in there. I would have been maybe a little bit more scared.
Definitely,
but, I was lucky.
They're harder to read, I think.
Whereas now I'm probably closest to them. Do you know what I mean? But at first, like they're the scary ones.
First impressions, so. yeah, very much so.
What about your life with movies then? What was your first favourite movie, if you can remember, and if you can remember the first time you ever went to the cinema? Do you have a recollection of that?
So again, going back to my granny, she used to like look after us on Saturdays and whatnot, and she lived not far away from the Parkhead Forge, so there was always a trip to the cinema. I think I saw most of like the early Pixar's cool. When they came out. So apparently I was there for A Bug's Life. I don't remember, was too young. But I definitely remember going to see Finding Nemo and The Incredibles.
Nice.
And maybe Toy Story 2 as well. Those are like the first three. And Secondhand Lions as well, actually. And the only reason I remember that is because we went to see Finding Nemo one week, came back the next week, my sister was like, let's go and see Secondhand Lions. And me being a wee brat, I was like, no, I want to see Finding Nemo again. So we saw Finding Nemo again. And then the next week, I came back by myself, just being Granny, and I was like, hey, Gran, I like the look of that Secondhand Lions. Let's...
Oh, man. I don't know that film. What is Secondhand Lions? What's that about?
Secondhand Lions is Michael Caine, Robert Duvall, I think. Sorry, I'm just going to do a wee quick Google just to make sure.
It's funny though, because like you go to see so many like big films at the cinema, but then sometimes I'm only now realising over the past few years, like all the smaller films that would literally just slip under the radar if you didn't go to the cinema on a regular basis.
If you didn't know they existed from the get-go. Aye. Yeah. Well, this is definitely one of those films. Michael Caine and Robert Duvall play like a pair of aging brothers living on a farm somewhere in like the south of the United States. And Haley Joel Osment of The Sixth Sense fame gets sent to live with them. And he learns all about them. Turns out they've had this mad life. One of them was in like the French Foreign Legion and stuff. And then one day they get sent a lion. And that's kind of, the story is mostly about him learning about his great uncles or whatever. But it's a very touching film. It maybe hasn't aged that well.
Yeah.
But it's a nice wee charming number. Michael Caine's very good in it.
Michael Caine's always great, but it sounds like one of those films that like was put on Disney Plus. Like, remember when what was it? Who was added to Disney Plus recently? Is it Star Now or something like that? Star. and like loads of like new films, like no one had ever heard. Lots of B movies straight to
Okay.
DVD releases were like thrown on Disney Plus, and it sounds like one of those ones, which again are so like some guilty pleasures involved in that. You know what I mean? Like
I
you might
do,
find some
yeah.
wee hidden gems. You know?
Aye. I think just because I love watching all sorts of films, like even if they're absolutely trash,
Hmm.
I do get a bit of a kick out of them. Like, 1 year for my birthday, someone gave me Nicolas Cage's Wicker Man
Nice.
and Sharktopus as well, because I think I'd just been talking a lot about how I didn't think either of them were very good, and
Right.
then lo and behold, I got them both for my birthday. But Sharktopus is like a horribly charming film. You're like, this is trash, but I reckon they're having a great time.
Yeah.
Like, it's
Exactly.
just fun to watch them just be completely ridiculous.
Do you like the Jaws films?
I've only seen the first one. I've never seen
Right.
any of
Okay.
the other Jaws films.
So I mean, the first one's the best one. I always say that
Yeah.
Jaws is like my favorite movie ever, other than I don't know Star Wars or whatever. But
Mm,
the other ones always get critiqued a lot. The second one not so much because the second one's kind of just a follow on from the first one. But the third one
sure.
gets a little bit silly, and it's like a shark that comes inside SeaWorld and how it's going to like affect the other animals in SeaWorld. Like the sharks going to eat the dolphins, things like that. So people start like rolling their eyes at that. But you know the way like it is technically is a bad film, kinda. But I'll
Uh-huh.
be able to see the good in it. You know what I mean? So you're probably the same. You're probably able to see the good in any film just because you have that wee soft spot towards it,
Absolutely.
you know?
Absolutely. In fact, when we were in school, we came up with a little kind of mantra, which was art, fart, or Paul Blart. And art speaks for itself, you know. Art is good. Fart again speaks for itself. It's bad. Paul Blart,
Mall
obviously
Cop.
from Paul Blart Mall Cop, yes, is something that is so bad that somehow it's kind of good. Like,
Yes.
Paul Blart arguably is a dreadful film, but my god, if it's not enjoyable. Like when he's
It's
playing
such a
Detroit
good
Rock
time.
City while all the heist stuff's going on, brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And he's cutting about in a Segway. He like
Yeah.
emerges from the ball pit. What a film! What,
I love Paul
absolutely.
Blart's. I remember I had the DVD. They made a second one, was never nowhere near as good.
Well, it
But
never is.
the never is. But I had the first one on DVD and I loved it a lot. And I haven't watched it in a long, long time. And then I don't know, like last summer or something, I had like a wee like overnight stay in Edinburgh. We went to see, what did we go and see? Was it maybe Beauty and the Beast or something at the Edinburgh Playhouse? And we'd had a few drinks and stuff, and we were a wee bit like tipsy and stuff. And we went back to the room and watched Paul Blart's Mall Cop. I don't know why that was the movie we picked, but
Because it's a night of culture, you know. You're at the
right.
Playhouse 1 minute, you're coming back, you got Kevin James on the big screen. What more do you
Kevin
want?
James on the Segway moving about with a wee lollipop. I don't know. That's so funny to bring that up. I've not thought about Paul Blart since that day, so that was good.
Well, you're welcome. You know, I think people should think about Paul
Paul
Blart more
Blart.
often. Yeah, Mall Blart. Um, but I always struggle to think of my favorite film. In fact, when you asked me to be on the podcast and you said, "What's my favorite
Oh
film?" I
yeah.
panicked because my knee-jerk response, whenever someone's like, "What's your favorite film?" I just, without even really thinking, I just go, Empire Strikes Back."
Right.
And they go, "Oh, really?" And I'm like, "Well, yeah, because you know it's got a twist and it's got like a fight scene at the start, and you know there's like a love story, like it's got a wee bit of
Yeah.
everything, blah blah blah."
Hoth.
Hoth, yeah, the whole like heroes training bit with Yoda and Dagobah and whatnot, like,
Yep.
yeah, it's good, but I don't really think it is my favorite film. And so when you asked, because I've been talking about it to people, I was like, Fiddler on the Roof. But
Right.
again, like, I really like Fiddler on the Roof. I will watch it at almost any opportunity, but also it's very long, and it is quite, it kind of goes on a bit in places. It's not, that's the thing, I don't really know that I would call it my favorite film.
Now you're just picking it apart. Convince yourself why it's not your favorite film.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's a bad film by any means. If
No.
anything, Fiddler on the Roof is a brilliant film, like, for all sorts of reasons that I won't go into, but highly recommended for anyone, including yourself, who hasn't seen it. I do
No, I've not seen
recommend
it.
going to see it. It was like one of those, people talk about the death of movie musicals in the 60s.
Right.
And Barbara Streisand unfortunately had a lot to do with it, because she came out with just film after film after film, and they just got worse, and people kind of got less interested, which is how we get things like The Godfather, actually, because people were sick of going to see Hello Dolly, and so Coppola's like, I've got a great idea.
Right. But then
But
we got
Fiddler
loads of
came.
gangster films after that.
Well, yeah, exactly. Yeah. Gangster films and weird little like Easy Rider type deals.
Yeah.
But Fiddler came along with West Side Story of that just at that peak of like, we're gonna make a show with great music that has, and Sound of Music as well actually, that has like a really really dark undertone, like a really like a secondary plot line that kind of goes over your head that you kind of forget about, but is really there the entire time. Because Sound of Music, obviously, it's right at the start of the Second World War. West Side Story, there's the whole thing with like immigration and like racial inequality in New York, and Fiddler on the Roof's all about the pogroms at the start of the 20th century, like the forcible eviction of Russian Jews from various lands in modern day like Belarus and Ukraine and whatnot. Just like
Right.
And again, it's something that's kind of whispered about, and you see little elements of it, but it's not really what the story is about. The story's about this one guy and his 3 daughters. Like I wish I had picked it now. It's a great film, but instead we're going to talk about something else.
No, I know. It is hard though. What is your favourite movie is such a hard question because it changes depending on your mood, really, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And it depends on the day of the week. And like
Aye.
I always
And what
say,
you've
Star
seen.
Wars and what you've seen. Yeah, what have you seen recently? Things like that,
Yeah.
you know. I always just go to Star Wars as well. But like everybody goes Star Wars. Everybody goes like a big franchise, right?
Mhm.
And then folk will say, all right, well, what Star Wars? And even that changes all the time. Like I always say that like A New Hope, the very first one, I like that one because it's like it was the first one I saw, and it was just imagine in 1977 being in the cinema and seeing this for the first time and just witnessing like cinema is like changing right now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That just
Right in
blows my
front of you.
mind. But then there's an argument for Empire Strikes Back. Then I grew up through the prequels, you know, and I've got a real soft spot for Revenge of the Sith. I genuinely think it's one of the best movies of the franchise, and it's one of my favorites. And then all the new ones came out, like The Force Awakens. I was 18. I went to the midnight screen, and it was the first time I saw a Star Wars film, like at that age at the cinema. And I was like going through my just started in clan, just started acting college and stuff. So I was like really into movies now and stuff like. So I've got a
Mhm.
real soft spot for The Force Awakens. So it's like, where do you pick, you know, your favorite Star Wars? So then if you go to like The Godfather or Indiana Jones or Spider-Man or Marvel, whatever, how do you pick your favorite one of those ones? So
Yeah, it is
that's why I
hard,
quite
yeah.
like looking at films like, say, for example, Fiddler on the Roof or Jerry Maguire, like we're going to talk about today, and things like that are kind of standalone. I feel like right now I'm into like standalone films. You know what I mean? Like just to see the
Aye.
begin, the middle, and the end. Like that's the told story there, and like why you can get into it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's a really tough question. And then I sent
It is.
John my my watch list that I've not, you know, all my stuff on Netflix. I'm saying, right, okay, I've not watched any of these. I want to watch them. Pick one of these. And John just, I don't know if it was randomly or maybe this is one that you wanted to watch for a while, but you picked Jerry Maguire, and I was like, yes, because that's one that always pops up on my Netflix, and I've always been like, I'd like to watch that. I've got no reason to
Yeah.
watch it. You know,
When I went through the list, there were a couple that I had seen. Zodiac, for example, I have seen. Zodiac, David Fincher, it's a brilliant film.
right.
Like the cast, I mean, Jake Gyllenhaal and Robert
yeah.
Downey Jr. to begin with, fantastic. Then you add in like Mark Ruffalo, and I'm sure Arlie Emery's in there as well from Full Metal
Oh, yeah.
Jacket, and like you've just got all these like little people cropping up, and they all just add to this. It's a great film, absolutely brilliant film. But Jerry Maguire, similar for me, it's one that has been spoken about for years. It's one that everyone's like, oh, you need to see Jerry Maguire. Oh, it's a great film. People are quoting it all the time, and I'd never seen it, so that pretty much was why I chose it, because I was like, well, let's tick one off the list, so to speak, you know?
Totally. And, you know, I had it in my head that Jerry Maguire was one thing. And then I watched it last night and I was like, this is not what I expected whatsoever. So much so that I didn't even know, looking at the poster, right? It's clearly Tom Cruise. But I thought it was Matthew Broderick, you know, from Ferris Bueller's Day Off.
Yeah.
For the longest time, because there's like a different kind of poster where he's like lying like that with his hands behind his head and he's like kind of like a silhouette. And it just looks like the Ferris
It
Bueller
looks like
poster.
Ferris Bueller, yeah.
You know? And then I clicked on it last night, I was like, it's Tom Cruise. I also had it in my head that it was very much like Ferris Bueller, where it was like a kind of American teen kind of adventure.
Aye.
When it's like actually about a sports
it
agent.
really wasn't.
You know?
Yeah.
When did you watch it and what did you think?
I watched it last week, and I will be honest, I didn't get a lot from it.
I agree.
Um,
No, I didn't. I don't think it was bad at all. I just thought it was a bit. I thought it was all right.
yeah, which is somehow worse. Like, at
Yeah,
least if it's bad, you can properly pick it apart and be like, "This didn't work. This was awful. They should have done this." Whereas if
yeah.
something's just all right, in my opinion, it's kind of beyond saving. It's just like, right, that's it.
That your decision's made. Like,
Yeah,
move on.
aye. Like I thought there were some good performances in it, but the plot overall didn't really grab me, and I'm still not entirely sure what the point of it was. Like before coming on today, just as a wee refresher, like I kind of went through it online,
Yeah,
and even when as I was going through the plot summary on Wikipedia, I was like, "Oh, was that the point that they were trying to make? Is that what this film's about?" Okay, cool. I just thought
yeah,
it was about a guy trying to make money through sports. Like, yeah,
yeah.
he's a sports. Like, Yes, the setup, the whole thing, I was just so confused. In fact, right from the get go, again on the Wikipedia summary, it's like, oh yeah, the son of an injured football or injured athletics star, like tells him to like get his act together, and that causes like a dream, which then causes his like manifesto.
Mm,
And I'd completely forgotten that that's how it happened. Like it left absolutely no
right.
impression. All I remember is like the fever dreams, and he wakes
Yeah,
up, and then all of a sudden he's like, I got it
like
right,"
super
and
busy.
then
Yeah.
yeah, and then all of a sudden he's let go. Oh, I had a point. What was it? It's gone. It'll come back to me.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Like, I was watching it going, like, what's the point? You know what I mean? And like, you know, the way like sometimes I can give a film the benefit of the doubt, you know, where like something's happening and I'm like, I'm not really, it's not grabbed me yet. You know what I mean? I'm not really into it yet. But I've got a feeling it's probably gonna like something's gonna happen. You know what I mean? Something's gonna happen that's
Yeah,
gonna make me go, oh wow, right, okay. And it just, I mean, again, I didn't think there was anything bad about it. I just wasn't really that into it. And I'm a big like I like a lot of sports actually. And I've never seen a film about that side of sports. I've never seen a sports agent kind of like being in charge of athletes in different sports and different teams and things like that.
yeah.
And you know, even a struggling one, you know. So I guess that's kind of interesting. But even so, like I wasn't like, oh, I really hope it works out for him. You know what I mean?
Aye, yeah, I do, and I think that's because in many ways I'm still unsure of what kind of film it actually was. Because you've got the whole thing with Renee Zellweger, where it's like, is this a rom com? But then most of the
Right.
plot's about him and Cuba Gooding Jr., obviously, and it's like, right, so it's not. It's about two men getting their way in the world. But then, what kind of film is it? I
Yeah.
just don't know. It's just
It's
kind of every
listed.
film.
I think it's listed on Netflix as a comedy slash romantic comedy.
Okay.
And I was like, I get, like, it's almost like they were going to go for a romantic comedy, but they thought, oh no, we actually don't want it to be a romantic comedy. So what we'll do is we'll
Aye.
leave this part of it in because it's nice character stuff, and then we'll focus more on the guy stuff, you know? And it was like,
Hmm.
right, okay, maybe if they chose a path, you know, let's make it a dramatic, let's make it
Yes,
a romantic comedy. That'll be, you know, it's
that'll be
more
fine.
important. Yeah.
And in fact, if they had done that, they probably could have cut out a good
Yeah.
half hour of the film. You know,
It
that
did
was
drag a wee
another
bit.
thing I felt was that it kind of went on a wee
It
bit.
did.
There was a good few moments that you were like, you don't need this.
Yeah. Like
Um,
there was a moment I paused it to go to the toilet or whatever, and I was like, I've been watching this for like 50 minutes and nothing's really happened, other than the fact he was sacked. But like, I understand he needed the time to kind of build his career back up, but he's already
yeah,
kind of back in the game because he's still got Cuba Gooding Jr.'s contract, you know.
aye. And I think
But
in
yeah,
some ways, like it's fine for a film where nothing really happens. Like if you watch Clerks um, or I'm trying to think of another example. Clerks is a
Lost
good
in
one though. Like
Translation.
Lost in Translation, yeah. Or even The Lighthouse to an extent, where there's not a great deal going on, but there's enough going on to just keep you tuned in. Then you can get away with pretty much anything. You can
Yeah,
have almost nothing happen on the screen for at least a couple minutes, and that's fine. Whereas even though with Jerry Maguire there were things happening, it just felt like nothing was really being accomplished. You
And
know?
it's lucky that this character was played by Tom Cruise, because Tom Cruise is such a likable person, you know. And you know, if you do have a film that's nothing's really happening and you can relate to the characters, if it's someone like Tom Hanks or something like that, where you're like, oh, it's fine, it's Tom Hanks. You know, if
Mhm.
this was played by someone that isn't naturally likable, it would have been even worse, you know.
Yeah.
Because he
Yeah.
is playing someone that's all about money and greed and fame and all that stuff, you know. But at the same time, you kind of like him. Like, he does do a good job, I think. Tom Cruise. There's a couple of really nice scenes and stuff. Um, but yeah, it kind of exemplifies that busy lifestyle that, as an actor, you kind of want to have. You kind of want to be doing lots of things. You know, you kind of want to be able to make money in different ways and things like that. You know, you're kind of like a freelancer. So I found that quite interesting, seeing that lifestyle, that he's so busy, he's always on the phone, he's always typing things, he's always pitching things in meetings, and he's still got time for a personal life, even though he struggles keeping a relationship. Like, I thought that was really nice, like the fact they were able to show his busy life, but at the same time, didn't feel too bad for him, you know?
No. No, I didn't. Well, if I'm honest, I didn't really feel. For me, anyway, I didn't really feel anything for him. Like,
Yeah.
even at the beginning, like, yeah, he gets fired, and yeah, he's still trying to make his way, but it's just, I mean, what's the big deal? If he had gone from sports management and then gone into something completely different, and it was about how he like coped, or how he used what he knew from one industry and applied it to another, that would have been really interesting.
Yeah.
Like a kind of kinky boots thing, where like somebody
Yeah.
comes in who's not really involved in the world but knows the product or knows whatever, and all of a sudden like really fixes it. Then I think that would have been a much more interesting film. But the fact that he's still just a sports agent,
Yeah.
and like,
See what you mean?
and him and Cuba are like just arguing about money all the time. I don't know. It wasn't as it didn't really grab me as well. And actually, on that note, I'm almost certain that every conversation that Renee Zellweger has with her sister, the name of the actor escapes me, but every conversation she has with her sister, and every conversation in the sister's house, where all the women from the divorce group are talking, is about love and men and relationships. And you're like, have they got nothing else going on? Really? Like, is that it? Is she just going to talk about how she kind of doesn't know how she feels about Tom Cruise? Are
Yeah.
they going to talk about anything else?
Yeah. And then it's
Like,
almost
I don't
like
know.
they definitely go back and forth in terms of the relationship as well. You think it's over, you think it's not going to work. There's actually a really nice scene, actually. It's quite sad when they kind of break up, I guess, but
Mm-hmm.
then they get back together. Um,
Hmm.
so yeah, and also Tom Cruise, the casting of Tom Cruise as well, as I say, is good because he's Tom Cruise. But I never look at him as a sports agent or an athlete. He doesn't strike me as that sort of guy. He's like a detective, Tom Cruise. You know what I mean?
Aye.
Swag kind of guy, not someone that's like putting his life on the line to make sure that a quarterback gets his money. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Strange,
I do. I
strange
do. I
casting.
think it's a strange position for him to be in. Like, I, if I'm honest, haven't seen a great deal of Tom Cruise movies. I've seen A Few Good Men, and I've seen Tropic Thunder,
Classic.
which I
Yep.
always forget that that's Tom Cruise. And I think that's it. Really, I don't think I've seen him in anything else.
Top Gun,
No, I've not seen Top Gun.
Mission
I've heard it's
Impossible.
ridiculous, but I've not seen Top Gun or Mission Impossible. I've not seen The Last Samurai.
Oh, that's really good.
I've not. Yeah, I don't know Tom Cruise very well as an actor. You
Not
know,
personally.
not personally. Well, not at all. No. Um, but I do kind of get what you mean. Like, I don't think that if you said to me, I'm casting for a sports agent, I don't think I would
Right.
immediately go, you know who you need? Tom Cruise.
Tom Cruise is the man for you. He's also
Yeah.
just like, he's quite small and like sweet, which is not really what you're supposed to have for this character, you know?
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, that's
Yeah.
interesting. Maybe
Maybe
it
it
would have
was
been
just
better
the
if it was
time
Matthew
period.
Broderick.
Maybe it would have been better if it was Matthew Broderick. You know, he might have been able to flip that switch a bit. Yeah.
There was, see, like the mid 2000s. In the mid 2000s, there was lots of like sports films like this. You know what I mean? There was like Dodgeball, Happy Gilmore, Bench Warmers, like loads of films like that was like focused on either like a team or a collective group of people that you really liked and really wanted to do well, like that came from the bottom and start from the bottom. Now
The
we're here kind of
underdog
thing.
stories, yeah.
Like there was loads of stuff like that. And obviously this is like 10 years before that. This is 96. So, what other big films came out in 96? Big films in 1996. Just search that in Google. We have, let's see, not very many.
I think 94 was a bigger year for films than 96.
Space Jam.
All right, okay, one. Yeah.
And Independence Day, Mission Impossible. There you go. 101 Dalmatians.
Oh.
The
Time live action.
Kill.
Right, okay.
Yeah. Star Trek: First Contact, Hunchback of Notre Dame, The Cable Guy, Jingle All the Way. These are films that are like very 90s, I think, very mid 90s. Toy Story, I guess, but that was 95. I guess so. It was probably still in the box office. Happy Gilmore came out in 96. Did it really?
Huh.
I thought it came out in the early 2000s. Anyway, what I'm trying to say is, it's a strange time in cinema. It's a strange time in Hollywood where this probably broke down some barriers. People were probably like, oh, wow, a sports film with Tom Cruise in a big mainstream kind of way. Whereas now, we've seen it all. We've been through that kind of golden age of these sports films. I said the exact same about The Matrix, right? I'd never seen the original Matrix film until like 2018 or something, right? And I'm sitting there watching it in the cinema because it was like a reissue of the cinema. And I thought that's going to be a great one to see in the cinema with the sound and all that stuff. And I'm watching it and it's a really good film, but also it came out in 1999. And we have seen every piece of CGI. We've seen every stunt. We've seen every flip. In 1999, I'm assuming that was absolutely groundbreaking,
Yeah. Absolutely.
But now watching it, I'm like, so maybe Jerry Maguire had that issue with this time round. We've seen every sports film. We've seen every Tom Cruise film. It's like, what's this going to do for me in 2022?
Yeah, how do we make it different? I think that does have a lot to do with it. I think that is why it, to this day, has such like a cultural like following, why it is this kind of cornerstone almost, is because it's maybe that is what we were talking about as a fault earlier on is actually what made it stand out, is because it's not quite a sports film, it's not quite a rom-com, but it's kind of both at the same time.
Yeah.
And I think people found that a lot more, I don't know, relatable maybe. Also because maybe that is it, in a kind of similar to It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, because very few of the characters are really that likable. That by the end of it, when they have that kind of turnaround, that flip, you do kind of like them a wee bit more. When Jerry realizes that in fact he's been an idiot and he does love Diane, is that her name? Renee Zellweger, anyway. Dorothy. I knew it began with a D.
No.
And him and Roy have that whole thing in the locker room where he's like, you need to be less aggressive, and Cuba's like, you need to get me the money, and like they kind of learn from each other. Like I think if it had all just been a bit more condensed,
yeah, I agree.
And
if they'd picked what they wanted to do,
then for me it would have been much more effective. However, as you say, at the time, we're spoiled sitting here in 2022. We've seen it all by now. They're churning out Marvel movies like they're sausages. They're just going for them. Like there's no end to them.
There's never going to be an end to those ones. Not when they're making the money they're making. So
no, exactly. We're going to be watching Black Widow 7: Rise of Iron Man in 5 years or whatever. Like,
aye, there was two really strange scenes, I thought, right? The first one was when they go out for dinner, right? Jerry Maguire and Dorothy Boyd. They go out for like their dinner. That's not, again, even in the film, they don't know what, like, is it a date? Is it not a date? Like, it's weird. And then like they're saying goodbye to each other at the door. And there's this bit where he like goes to kiss her and he accidentally unhooks her top. And like,
I don't think it's an accident.
He plays it off as an accident. And he's holding the top. And he's like, oh, I should maybe fix this. And it goes on forever. And I'm just like, what's such a strange scene?
Yeah. That was, I had a similar reaction. I was like, oh my God, either do this inside or don't do it at all.
Right.
Like, I get that it's 1996 and we've all got a lot of learning to do, but
Yeah.
do not undress a woman on her front porch and then
No,
just go.
I thought
Right,
it was
well,
going
I'm
to
going
go
to
all the
go.
way. They're sitting in the
Yeah.
front door, and he's like taking it off. I was like, "What are you doing?"
Yeah, stop this.
And then the next scene that I thought was weird is the morning after. And she's like in her kitchen, she's just like, I love him. I
Oh,
love
yeah.
him. I love him. I love him. I was like, why is she saying it so many times? And he's like listening through the door, through the wall, and it like shows her, then shows him, and he's just like reacting like, what am I going to say to this? And then he comes out and everyone's like, oh my God, it's Tom Cruise, it's Tom Cruise. And I was just thinking that must be what his life is like. You know, people just going, I love Tom Cruise. And then Tom Cruise walks in and
then
he's like the
there, and you're
nicest
like, oh
guy,
my God.
you know?
Yeah.
He's like, I know, everyone loves me. That just must be Tom Cruise's life.
Yeah.
What it wouldn't be like to be like him. What did you make of Cuba Gooding Jr.'s character? Because I thought he was good, and he's actually quite a funny character and one of the better kind of. It gave the film a little bit of depth, but again,
Yeah.
I didn't really know why he was there, other than the fact that he's the one that he's trying to get the money for.
I thought as a supporting role, it was a pretty good one, you know, and he did win an award for it. So kudos for Cuba. But again, he's not an actor I know very well. I've seen him in like silly comedies, like Rat Race and like Snow Dogs, where it turns out that he's like got some kind of Inuit background or whatever. Like,
why do you strike me as someone that loves Snow Dogs? That's actually like
Snow Dogs was a great film, actually. I really liked that growing up, but that's because I just like the idea of hanging about with a pack of dogs. I think more so than being in the snow. Yeah, but yeah, I don't know. As a character, I think he's actually the one who grows the most, like, and has like a proper arc almost. Whereas Jerry, pretty much right up until the end, is roughly the same, and then all of a sudden has an epiphany. But I do get what you mean. There were certain points that I was just sitting there like, this doesn't need to. He doesn't need to be here. We don't need to be having this conversation. Who's it serving? Is it serving the plot? No.
Yeah, I like Cuba Gooding Jr., but like again, it was also like this actually doesn't need to be in here, and he also could have been a kind of smaller character. You know, the athlete that Jerry Maguire's trying to fight for. It doesn't need to be a whole part of the plot, you know, even though he was good in it. See the quote when he comes in and he expresses his love after they break up.
You complete me.
Aye, and then she says, "You had me at hello."
Yeah,
I feel like that's a really famous quote. Is that where that's from?
Yeah, it is. Yeah. It's exactly what that's from. Yeah.
At least that's a good thing. Then that ends on a strong note, I guess.
Yeah, people definitely are still talking about it. Even Show Me the Money, like which happens very early on. Like that's definitely kind of lasted with us. And Jonathan Lipnicki sitting in the back of the car being like, "Did you know the average human head weighs 8 pounds?" Like, it's got some very memorable lines in it, and I think to some extent that's to do with the fact that James L. Brooks, who of Simpsons fame, was so heavily involved in like the production process of it. I think that's why, as well as the reasons we've kind of spoke about in terms of that kind of sports film rom-com balance or lack of, I think these are all the little reasons why it kind of stood out. I don't think it was because it was actually a good film. I think it just had some really solid moments here and there.
I agree.
And that's what kind of stood out to people. And that's why people were like, oh yeah, Jerry Maguire. Because
good
of that
film.
Big confession at the end where he comes bursting in and he's like, you complete me. And she's like, you had me at hello. Yeah. I don't think he says hello, does he, when he comes in?
He does, yeah. But all the other ladies are talking and he like, like not heard. He kind of goes, hello.
Oh, yeah, okay. He just whispers, hello.
I'm Tom Cruise. Yeah, there's lots of nice moments. You're right, and I didn't know that about The Simpsons. Lots of like funny wee one-liners and stuff. Like the wee boy, he goes, "That's my mofo." Like I thought that was quite funny.
Yeah, I did. I really liked that. Actually, I really liked Cuba's family in general. Actually.
Yeah.
Like his characters, his like their whole story and plot or whatever. I think that was actually a really interesting thing that. If it had been more of a sports film, they could really have honed in on. The fact that Cuba's character's career is only however long, you know, that from he's got essentially like a 5-year window from this point in the film, and he's only in his
Yeah.
like mid to late 20s, if not early 30s. Like after that, what the hell is he going to do apart from be in the odd Reebok advert or
Yeah.
maybe like sponsor a can of Pringles or something? Like that's it's no wonder he's trying to fight for this cash, because otherwise he's destitute. You know, especially if there's an injury, which in American football there so often is.
Yeah.
Like, I think if it had been a film about Cuba Gooding Jr., even, and
Right.
that
I think
character's evolution.
I think what we've discovered here is this needs to be two separate films.
Yeah.
It would be so much
Yeah.
better if we had a film about Cuba Gooding Jr.'s character, because that would be
Yeah.
a really interesting story.
Definitely.
You know, especially when the injury happens, and I this is going to sound horrible, but it probably would have benefited the film if he didn't get back up after that bad injury.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
that would be
I
a
think so,
real
yeah.
moment.
Yeah.
You know, and then the rom-com could have been its own thing.
Yeah. Even that could have been kind of cool if they'd done it as two separate films, but with the same characters, and it's happening along the same plot line. Like, not quite a sequel prequel type thing, but like it's two different films happening at the same time, and there's a bit of overlap. Like Tom Cruise is the common denominator.
That would be really interesting because Jerry Maguire is a busy guy, so he's doing both things at once, and there could easily be sequels. Oh, we've cracked it.
We've solved the puzzle. We've done it.
Yeah. But I mean, I didn't dislike the film at all. I'm not going to rush back to watch it anytime soon.
No.
I kind of have this thing just now where I'm like, every film is available on streaming services, right? But when I was younger, I used to collect loads of like movies and DVDs and Blu-rays and things like that, right? So I still try to keep that up, you know, like I'm a collector at heart. It's more of a hobby than anything, but it's also money and stuff, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But at the same time, I have this thing where like, if I really like a film, you know, I want to own that film. There was something really charming about that. You know, you have it on DVD, you can watch it whenever you want. You can watch it all over and over again. Like, it's one thing you have in your room is this film that you really like and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So I had this in my head, especially through doing my YouTube videos and things like that. Build this, like, perfect collection, you know, like my perfect collection of all my favourite films. When I watch a film and I love it, I go right on to Amazon, buy a cheap used copy, and it's in the collection. I now own that film, you know. And there's been plenty of times recently where I've watched the film for the first time and I've went, yep, let's add it at one point. You know, I'll try and find it in a shop or something. Whereas last night watching that, that's the best way I can sum it up. I was watching it last night and I was like, this is a good film, but I don't need to own it. You know what I mean?
See it again. Yeah.
Don't need to see it again. You know? But yeah.
I think you're right. There is something quite charming about owning it. And in fact, it's something I was reading about today, is that like, because of our transition into the world of streaming, we've kind of lost the novelty that came with like DVDs and stuff. Like, when was the last
100%.
time you actually watched something with a director's commentary, for example?
Right.
Like, it's just not available. Like,
right.
And some of them
Disney
are really
Plus
interesting.
Disney Plus is kind of good for that because they have these ridiculous amount of extras where you can get the director's commentary.
Oh yeah.
But the most popular one is Netflix, you know, and you don't get that at all. Netflix is also criticised a lot because when you've got your favourite films on Netflix, you go, I don't need to buy it. I've got it on Netflix. And then at one point it'll be taken off Netflix and then you're forced to buy it again. Like, it's not as comforting, you know, as having that at your disposal at all times, you know. There's been a couple of times recently that I've watched the film and I've got it on Blu-ray or whatever, and you know, it has a director commentary or something, and then I've just like watched it again with the commentary. Like what I did that with Aliens recently. They did like a James Cameron audio commentary, and it was fascinating. But at the same time, it's like sometimes I end up trying to listen to the dialogue and stuff, and you miss certain things. It's a wee bit off-putting. But I think if you find a really good audio commentary, then it's like you're in. You must love that film. You know, you learn so much about it and stuff. You know.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
But yeah, I think we're done here. Thanks very much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Appreciate it. And feel free next time you're on Netflix and you see one of the films I sent you, or if you make your own watch list, send it to me. You can come back.
As it happens, I did many years ago make a list of films I need to see, which I may send you as an attachment. I have a feeling you will have seen quite a lot of them, but
well, you never know.
It's either things that people have said to me, oh, you need to see this, or things that I myself have thought I should probably watch that. Like, some of them are pure blockbuster classics, like War of the Worlds or V for Vendetta, for example, stuff like that. And then there's other like weird little kind of shitty films like not The Birds. That's not a weird little shitty film. That's Hitchcock. It's a classic. The Room is on here. Bruno, even the Sacha Baron Cohen film. Like, there's a wee bit of everything, you know.
Aye. The Room, is that the one with oh, I don't know, the one that goes, "Oh, hey, Mark."
Yes, that's the very one. Yeah,
I've not seen it, but
another film that, to go back to
Tommy
the start,
Wiseau.
Tommy Wiseau, yeah. Another film that's so bad it's somehow kind of good. Yeah, but yes, it's been a pleasure.
No, not at all. Thanks very much for your time today, and I hope everybody listening and watching enjoyed. I have been going through all these films and being like, these are people coming on and they're picking their favourite films. You know, as you've heard from this episode, that Jerry Maguire is not our favourite film, but you should definitely watch it. Why not? It's another film to add to your library. If you haven't
seen it, give it a watch, and feel free to tell me I'm wrong somehow. I'm not going to tell you how to contact me to tell me I'm wrong, but you can tell me I'm wrong.
You can get us on Twitter @TheGoodBitPod. You can say, tell John that he's wrong, and I won't do that. Until next time, everybody, thank you very much for listening. Take care of yourselves, and we'll catch you all down the road.
Citizens